Hi, everyone. Today I'm discussing our aversion to counting calories. Why do so many of us dislike counting calories? Well, for one, it can kind of suck. It's a lot of extra effort to have to sit there and track your calories or meal plan and try to figure out how many calories a certain meal is going to be. We can use tools like cookbooks, healthy cookbooks that will tell us, exactly how to make a meal and how many calories are going to come from it. But that takes a lot of work too. And so I totally understand that. One of the things that I talk about so much is the importance of knowing how many calories you're consuming and putting yourself in a deficit. Listen, at the end of the day, science is science. You have to be in a deficit. But do you have to be so meticulous about counting calories? There is this ongoing trend on the internet. It's called intuitive eating, and basically it just means being able to know how much you need to eat at any given time. That's going to really be towing the line in the sense that it's enough to fill you, but not stuff you. And if you're on a weight loss plan, it's enough to not create a lot of discomfort, but yet still keep you in a deficit. And the problem with intuitive eating is, especially for people like us, if we could eat intuitively, we wouldn't have this issue. We don't eat intuitively. We eat compulsively. We eat impulsively. So kind of relying on ourselves to say, hey, this is good enough. Unless you break your food dependency issue and you really rise above that, which I have, intuitive eating doesn't work. So yes, now I can intuitively eat, but it's not 100% intuitive. It's also a lot of background knowledge. I just know how many calories within plus or minus 50 that I'm eating at any given time. I can ballpark it. I can literally look at the meal and give a really close estimate of how many calories are in that meal, plus or minus 50, which is pretty darn good. But it took me two things to happen to get to this level. I had to break my food dependency issue, and I had to go through a calorie education. If you give me a type of food, I can rattle off the calories of that food off the top of my head 90% of the time and be super accurate. It's because I did it for a long time. So for those of you who are like, oh my gosh, like this sounds like so much work, keeping track and counting all the calories, because, here's the thing, when you eat something, it's not just that one thing, right? Like you don't have like one pancake in the morning or even a couple pancakes. You have a couple pancakes with maybe a little dash of butter, a little light syrup, some sausage, right? For lunch, it's not just deli turkey that you're stuffing in your mouth, right? It's turkey that's on sandwich bread that has some condiments and lettuce and tomato, maybe something like that. And dinner can be even more complex. You're talking about the meal I recently made. It was pork chops with some dried cherries, and it had some apple juice and onions, and it had some sliced apple in it. And then I had a side dish of string beans, so some garlic, a bunch of some oil, a bunch of different condiments and different, ingredients. And, to have to sit there and calculate each and every one can be a pain. Now, of course, you can use a cookbook, but, you're not going to be relying on a cookbook for every single meal, every single day. I did that for a while where I would buy these healthy cookbooks. I still have them. It's like a library of these cookbooks that I still use because they're really healthy, delicious meals. And you can sit there and plan and say like, okay, I'm going to make dinner on Monday night and that's going to be my dinner for like the next 4 or 5 nights, right? And you calculate the total number of calories for the big meal that you make, then you divide it by the number of days that you're going to eat it for, and you see if that's going to be within your caloric guidelines if you're trying to lose weight, which you should have already figured out what that is to lose weight. And that's fine, but there's a con to that, right? I mean, now you have to eat the same meal for 5 nights in a row. So some people can do it. I could easily do, I mean, I used to do one meal for 3, 4 nights tops. So that was the maximum. And I have to say that those weeks were few and far between. Most of the time I was eating the same meal for maybe 3 nights in a row during the week. I fast. So I told you that that was one of my days. One of my days during the week was a fasting day. And then on the weekend, I just went out to eat and enjoyed myself. But I'm at a point now where I'm maintaining. I'm not trying to lose any more weight. I think I told you in the fall, I gained a few extra pounds. And so I put myself in a deficit. And sometime before the new year, I got rid of that extra weight. And now I'm just maintaining again. But going back to my original premise that a lot of people are really averse to calorie counting, which then leads to them looking at this as maybe too effortful. Okay. And so, yeah, there's a food dependency issue that I always think is the biggest issue. But this is another obstacle. It's extra work, right? I mean, you're talking about exercising and fitting that into your day, and that's extra work, and counting calories is extra work. It is extra work. It really is. So how can we make these tasks easier, right? If we're talking about exercise, it just has to really do with scheduling and then making it a priority and getting in the habit of doing it. You don't need a ton of time with exercise, maybe a half an hour a day, right? So that I don't think is a big obstacle. I think where most people kind of cringe is the calorie counting. Every day keeping track of the calories. All right, how many calories are in this meal or that meal, especially if they're, buying food out or that kind of thing. That becomes more difficult to calculate the calories. So then you say, okay, I'm going to make meals at home. And so there's more meal preparation and that takes time and everything else. And it's not just meal preparation. I mean, listen, many of us prepare meals. We prepare breakfast or lunches or dinners. And listen, if you're not preparing meals often, then you have to start with that because that's a major issue. I mean, if you're looking at your eating plan, whatever that is now, your eating style, and you're eating out like 2 times a day, 2 of those meals a day are eating out or grabbing stuff out, that's an issue. I mean, that alone, if you just fix that and started preparing meals, forget counting calories, just preparing your own meals at home, healthier versions, and that alone could put you in a deficit, potentially, okay? But I would start with that. But for those of us who, yeah, we cook from time to time, we make our lunches, not all the time, but, a majority of the time, we prepare breakfast or something to eat that we can take to work. We're used to doing that. But then to have to sit there and scrutinize calories, I think for a lot of people, that's kind of like this obstacle where they're just like, yeah, maybe I can do it for a week or two if I had to lose 5 pounds for a wedding or something, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Well, one, you'll never do this for the rest of your life. You will get to a level where you just know, what works for your body in terms of the number of calories to maintain your weight and what that looks like in a meal, and you're not scrutinizing it. You're saying like, yeah, this looks like about, I usually have like, just ballparking it here, 600-700 calorie breakfast. And this looks like, a typical kind of breakfast. People like me are able to do that because we've made so many breakfasts, right? at when I was trying to lose weight, 500 to 600 calorie levels. When I was trying to put on more muscle, I know what about 1,000 calorie breakfast looks like, and I even know what a 700 calorie breakfast looks like, which is more of like maintenance for me. So I can ballpark that. Same thing with lunches and same thing with dinners. Now, where I become a little less accurate is when I eat out, but I'm even pretty darn good with that. I wouldn't say it's plus or minus 50 when it's someone else making the meal, like when I'm eating out or grabbing food to go. But I would say it's plus or minus 100, which is not bad at all, because I can guarantee you, most of you are probably really bad at this. And I'm not saying that to try to, aggrandize myself like, I'm above you. No, because I was there. But the bottom line is to get to my level, you have to go through a calorie education. So whether or not you want to do it kind of simultaneously while you're doing your weight loss plan, that's fine. That's what I did. I learned about calories because I every week would plan meals. I would learn how many calories this is or that is, and it just kept going into my, calorie encyclopedia up here. In long-term memory, I'm absolutely convinced I have a separate memory space in my brain that just stores calorie information. And I know so much now. So you can do it that way. But if you're kind of like, no, like that just seems like so much work, here is an alternative. Do the calorie education first, and then try to ballpark meals. All right. So what do I mean? Well, it's like taking a class, really. And so if you kind of want to like not do it simultaneously, because it sounds like too much work learning about calories, planning, and all this stuff, and then also losing weight and going through that process, do it before. Say, hey, I'm going to start my weight loss plan 2 months from now or 3 months from now. And for the next 2 or 3 months, I'm studying calories. I'm going to buy a book, or I'm going to go online, and I'm just going to every day put in typical foods that I eat and see how many calories they are. And then in addition to this, also what you want to do is you do want to measure food every now and then, and you can look at that as part of the class. You don't have to measure food for every meal. You don't have to measure food even every day. But at least a few times a week, you should pick a meal where you're really going to study what an ounce looks like of this, or an ounce of that, or a cup of this, or a tablespoon of that. And you're gonna start ballparking it. Okay. And maybe even test yourself every now and then. Like you can have fun with this. I know some of you will think this is very unusual kind of activity for me to consider fun. But you can say, like, I think a quarter cup of flour looks like this. Then, pour it in the cup without looking, pour it in like one of those big measuring cups without looking. And then take a look at it and see like how close are you. Okay. You can do something like that. Same thing with like a tablespoon of this. And you can kind of by eye pour it out and then measure it and see what, where you're at. Or everybody should have a digital scale. You can say like, I think this is probably about 5 ounces of turkey breast, and I'm going to put it on the scale, and I'm not going to look, and then I'm going to look and see what it measures, and oh, I was pretty darn close. It's actually 6 ounces. With some things, you may actually be pretty accurate with, but I'm sure there are going to be many foods you're not accurate with. And the inaccuracy may have more to do not with the measurement, so to speak. Like many of you may be used to cooking and preparing meals, so maybe that's pretty easy for you to eyeball a tablespoon of this, or a quarter cup of this, or a couple ounces of this. Where I think our inaccuracies really are prevalent is trying to guess the amount of calories in a type of food, right? Like, many of you might be surprised at how much full fat salad dressing is, or oils, or cheese, or nuts, or, a lot of what we call these calorically dense foods. But I talked yesterday a lot about, there needs to be a process that we go through before we pull the trigger, right? So there's like these stages of motivation that are mental, that we get more and more prepared and ready, and then finally we do it. And that's how it works as human beings. When we try to change something significant, not something small and easy, something significant and challenging, that there are these stages of mental preparedness that we have to go through right before we're about to pull the trigger. Sometimes we go through these stages for years before we actually do something. And it might seem like, oh yeah, this week I did it because I was finally motivated. No. That motivation was like a wave building over the years. And then finally it got to a point where it was ready. The only thing I know about physics, the only thing I can ever remember from physics class was the difference between potential and kinetic energy. And so, as the potential increases, eventually there's kind of this breaking point where it turns into kinetic energy, which is, it's actually, energy that you can see or can measure, so to speak. And by the way, I might be a little inaccurate with the way I just described that. I'm okay. My out is I'm not a physics teacher, nor do I presume to be an expert on physics. But it's kind of a parallel that I thought of, that there is this like potential that builds and builds and builds and builds, and then finally, you hit that tipping point and you do it. Well, this is a behavior, right? That is not a behavior that's going to lead directly to weight loss. Like, you can learn all you want about calories and how much is this and how much is that, and lose absolutely no weight, right? Because yeah, I'm learning about all this information, but I'm not applying it. So in the same kind of sense, what you could do is you could study calories, really learn as much as you can about them, especially foods you typically eat. Like, you don't need to worry about foods you hardly ever eat, right? But learn about all the common ones, the ones that you tend to eat. And there's some really great calorie guides that can even tell you some of your favorite, grab and go foods from some of the chain restaurants, or just, ballpark, like what a typical turkey and American cheese sandwich, has in terms of the calories, so that you don't have to learn about each and every ingredient for each and everything, but you really do want to learn as much as you can. And so you learn as much as you can about calories for like the next couple months. And then with that information, one, I think that's going to help you be motivated, because you're like, listen, I didn't learn all this information for nothing. I want to use this information. I spent 2 months studying calories like it was a class. I want to use this information now. I want it to go somewhere. So I think it will really help with motivation in that regard. And then it will also help a motivation because it's like, all right, you already took out one of the biggest obstacles, which is having to kind of plan meals and measure and count calories and everything else. You already have that information. So now you can just go ahead and ballpark it. Yep, this, and this, here's my sandwich. That's probably about 500 calories. And you'll probably be pretty darn accurate. And if you have a lot of weight to lose, right, you don't need to be as accurate. The more weight you have to lose, the less accurate you have to be. You still got to be within the ballpark, right? But once you start getting to those last 10 pounds, and yeah, then the accuracy counts more, right? Because you don't have that much to lose anymore. But just doing this calorie education can help so much to motivate you. And then when you actually do it, don't count calories anymore in the sense of measuring every ingredient. You know, you're going to count them, but you're going to do it in a different way. It's going to be more of like a holistic approach. Like, I'm making my sandwich. This is what I want. I'm going to put a little bit of mayo, not too much. I know how much calories are in this mayo. And I'm going to use some of this and some of that. And maybe want a little bit of oil and not too much because I know how much is in oil. And I have some healthy avocado, but only a couple slices because avocado is good fat. But again, it's a lot of calories, very calorically dense. And you'll make your sandwich and you look at that and you'll say, that's about 500 calories. You'll probably be pretty darn close. So rather than doing this simultaneously where like, okay, I'm measuring this many avocado slices is 3, that's 75 calories. This much oil is 60 calories. This much turkey, I need 5 ounces, that's this much. And rather than doing it that way, do the calorie education first and then start meal planning. Not meal, well, meal planning or meal creating. There is a ton of research that shows we will make changes just by being more aware. So in other words, if you start self-monitoring, there's a fancy word that just says you're looking very closely at a given behavior. If you start self-monitoring a certain problematic behavior that you do, just by monitoring it closely, doing nothing other than monitoring it, the research shows that it will decrease. Not a ton, but it will decrease to some degree just by looking at it. It's almost as if we can't be in denial about it anymore. And it's like right there in front of our face. And I think, you know, a lot of times we do these really compulsive behaviors because we do them impulsively, automatically, without thought. And it's not in our face, so to speak, because we're kind of like pretending like we're not doing it. And when you self-monitor, you're getting real with yourself, you know. Like, so if you're like, well, I don't know, I do that behavior sometimes, it's not good, but I do it. Maybe, I don't know, I think I do it like 5 times a day. And then all of a sudden you self-monitor and you're like, I actually do it like 50 times a day. You know, just that acknowledgement. You can't be in denial. You can't not be aware. I mean, you are aware now of how much you're doing this behavior. And so just naturally, it tends to reduce. Well, it's the same thing with this principle of learning about calories. You know, you won't have the luxury, so to speak, anymore of making this, you know, mile-high sandwich and being like, that's only about 200 calories. You're going to have this calorie education. You're going to look at that and be like, man, this is like at least a couple thousand calories, because I know pretty much what all the different ingredients are in terms of their caloric content. Try this instead. The reason why I put this video out is because I do feel like a lot of people get turned off by my emphasis of calories. And my emphasis of calories is just simply because you have to be in a deficit. At the end of the day, however you get to a deficit is fine by me, right? I mean, if you want to do one of those diets where you take a complete macronutrient out so that it helps you not eat as many calories because now you took out a major macronutrient out of your diet, right? Then by all means, fine. You know, you like the ketogenic diet, you know, you like fats and protein a lot, you like savory rather than sweet, and that works for you. And, you know, it's easy to put yourself in a deficit because you've eliminated a big part of your calories, which are carbohydrates. Then do that. You know, if you want the carbohydrate and fat diet, the donut diet, I made that up, by the way, and you don't want to eat any protein, and you take that big macronutrient out of your day and you wind up in a deficit, pretty hard to do. But if you could do it, if it did result in a deficit, then by all means, take out a macronutrient, take out fats, take out carbs, take out protein, do whatever you need to do to get in that deficit. But at the end of the day, that's what you have to do. That is the goal. Okay, this is Dr. Fields. Please, if you have any questions or comments, or if you have an idea for a video, you're like, hey, Dr. Fields, can you talk about this? Even if I don't know the topic well, I'll research the hell out of it and I'll put together a video for you. Okay. I'm here to help. I hope you guys all have a great weekend and I'll talk to you soon.